Come, O fellow traveler. Come inside from that wild world. Come away from the traffic, the beeping, the noise, the blaring. Come away from your phone. Come away from your calendar, your daily stress, and come to this place of calm and peace. For this morning, we come to restore our balance. We come to be filled with the light of love. We come to revel in the joy of one another's company. We come this morning to hold one another. We come to worship. Let us begin. Along the coast of Saco, Maine, there's a Unitarian Universalist retreat center called Ferry Beach. It's a place where I've been going since I was 2 years old. It's a place that's filled for me with nostalgia and magic. It's a place that whenever I go to, it fills me with this sense of calm, sense of peace. It's a feeling like I'm back home. And my family and I, we returned to this place just last month in August. And I can distinctly remember that hot August night. We made that long drive through traffic. We got our campsite set up. I was dripping in sweat. And we finally made it down to that majestic shore. Finally, I was home. During my childhood, members from our church, a church very much like this one, would gather at Ferry Beach every summer. And I remember as a young boy, those early mornings, witnessing the first ray of light over the water. I remember spending hours as a child building sandcastles. I remember listening to the grown-ups sing to us around the campfire at night, and all us sleepy kids would try to stay awake. The s'mores did help somewhat. This place called Ferry Beach is where I first learned what sacred community is. It's the first place that I learned how to really be in covenant with one another. It's the place that taught me what church is. Today, I would like to talk a little bit about this wild and wonderful and sometimes challenging religion we call Unitarian Universalism. I know for many of you, you've been coming here for a long time. Some others are new to this faith. And often this whole thing might feel so wide open. This whole religion feels so amorphous that sometimes it's hard to get your arms around it. Sometimes it's hard to put your finger on what truly makes us Unitarian Universalists. I've been at UU my whole life, and I still struggle with that. Has anyone here ever been talking to someone of another faith, and they look at you and they say, "What do Unitarians believe?" Yeah. That question has always baffled me. And I remember once years ago, I was talking to my conservative Christian father-in-law, and he asked me that question. And he asked it, I think operating under that notion that UUs are some kind of wishy-washy, anything goes kind of faith. And when I tried to answer, I was kind of stumped. I remember rattling off something about our 7 UU principles, and then I finally said, well, all UUs have unique beliefs. And then that didn't work, so I finally just turned to him and said, well, what do you believe? Does any of that sound familiar to you? Yeah. Well, I can tell you that the reason that's such a hard question for us to answer is because it is simply the wrong question. And the issue is that most other faiths, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, they're all centered around a creed. They are united by their religious beliefs. And for those who aren't sure, a creed is a statement of dogmatic belief, a belief that cannot be proven or disproven. It's taken on faith alone. For any Catholics or former Protestants, you may be familiar with the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed. They talk about God as three, as the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Another example, the core concept within Judaism is that Abraham and all the descendants of his are God's chosen people. Almost all the world religions have some type of creed at their heart. These belief systems, they bind the followers together. Often these creeds are spoken aloud during worship services. But an unfortunate aspect of these creeds is that they tend to exclude anyone who doesn't believe in them. Unitarian Universalism is different. We don't have a creed. In fact, what is unique about our faith is that we actively encourage individuals to seek their own truth and meaning in the world. If you take a moment and look around at one another, you all have different beliefs. Some of you may identify as Christian UUs, or Jewish UUs, maybe pagan UUs, maybe atheist UUs. And as we know, all of us here are very complex individuals. We all ask these bigger questions of life, of death. And we may like everything that our UU community has to offer, but somehow that childhood faith that we had, it's always a part of us. We may love sharing our UU candles of joys and sorrow, but we may also find great meaning in our lifelong Jewish practice of sharing the Seder plate. We may still somehow crave that thing we had in our childhood, in our Catholic services of incense and candles. But Unitarian Universalism doesn't make you choose. But let's not get the impression that Unitarian Universalism is a free-for-all and that you can do whatever you want, because nothing could be further from the truth. Our 7 UU principles help clarify those things that we hold most dear. Our principles speak about things like the inherent worth and dignity of all people. They speak about practicing justice and equity and compassion in human relations. They talk about respecting the interdependent web of all existence. And while often these sound easy, I've heard from others that anyone could believe in those. Try practicing them. Try seeing the inherent worth and dignity in someone who has committed genocide. Try respecting the interdependent web of all of existence when each of us here consumes far more energy than the earth can handle. Try practicing justice and equity when we benefit from this unfair and unjust economic system that we live in. Unitarian Universalism is not an easy faith to practice. But to be clear, our 7 UU principles are not a creed. Rather than a dogmatic creed that can only be taken on faith and can either be proven or disproven, our principles state those things which we value, those things that tell us how to be with one another and how we're called to honor and respect our neighbors and our planet. And what binds us together is our covenant. When we enter into a UU community, we make a sacred covenant with one another. Typically, UU congregations work together to craft their own congregational covenant. Now, it recently did come to my attention that we here at First Parish don't actually have a congregational covenant. It's okay, no worries, no judgment. We'll work on it. And as your new minister, I do look forward to having these conversations in the months coming. And I want to go back to our reading this morning from James Luther Adams. And for those who aren't familiar, he's one of our one of our wonderful 20th century Unitarian theologians. And as he writes, I call that church free, which enters into covenant with the ultimate source of existence, that sustaining and transforming power not made with human hands. It binds together families and generations. It protects us against the idolatry of any human claim to absolute truth or authority. The goal is the prophethood and the priesthood of all believers. Of all believers. See, here James Luther Adams is so eloquently describing what makes our faith different. No one human can claim authority over another. All of us are priests. All of us here are prophets. All of us are called to speak our own truth, to live our faith in the best way that we know how. And what grounds us is that covenant. But none of this is a new idea. This certainly was not invented by Unitarians or Universalists. This concept goes all the way back to Hebrew Scriptures, to the foundation of Western religion. I'm sure you recall, after Noah and his family survived those great floods, God made a covenant with all of Noah's descendants to bless them and to never flood the earth again. Later, God renewed that covenant with Abraham, whose descendants practiced Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and Unitarian Universalism. Today, we covenant with one another and with all that we call holy to decide what is most sacred, what's most important to this congregation, to decide what behaviors and attitudes we want to promote, understanding that we all have different theological beliefs and that those differences are to be honored. This is actually quite similar to the vows many of us took when we got married. Spouses covenant with one another to love each other, even when they're not worthy of that love. They covenant to be with one another in sickness and in death. Some days, it's hard to live up to those promises. Anyone who's married there knows that some days our covenant is truly what keeps us together. And so it is with our church covenant. When Joe, who didn't get his personal initiative through the executive board, storms out of that meeting, he threatened to take all of his money with him as he leaves the church. When Monica decides to badmouth that cocky new minister and tell everyone else about it. When Edna says that none of those rotten, bratty kids are allowed at coffee hour anymore. Our covenant, it returns us to our agreements. It returns us to our better angels. It reminds us that together, we're a community where love is truly what matters. So I would invite you, the next time someone asks you, what do you believe? You can certainly tell them what you believe, but you can also tell them that you are connected not by belief, but by their sacred covenant that they make with their community. We're covenantal, not creedal. Our wonderful Unitarian Universalist president of the UUA, Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, she recently wrote that, quote, "This is no time for a casual faith." She was reflecting that there's too much suffering in our world. Too much suffering to not take our UU faith seriously. Well, in that spirit, I'd also say that this is no time for a casual covenant. If we want here at First Parish to do the work of feeding the hungry, those who hunger for love and acceptance right here at First Parish, and for those who hunger for their next meal, if we aspire to welcome the stranger, that stranger who comes to our doors on a Sunday morning, and the one who crosses borders in hopes of a better life for their family, if we want to help avert the climate crisis, let's work to make this very building more energy efficient, and at the same time, take to the streets to march for climate justice. For with all that's happening in our world, this is no time for a casual covenant. You know, last month as I walked along the shores of Ferry Beach, I came upon a rare treasure, a sand dollar. You know, I picked it up. I'd been looking for one all week. And the shell was whole, but you know, I noticed it had a little hairline fracture. Well, I gently carried it home, back to our campsite. My wife and daughters were, of course, thrilled. You know, when it was time to pack up the car, my wife gently wrapped it in a towel and put it in a really safe place in the car. And when we returned home to Quincy, I took the wrapped sand dollar out and I carefully unwrapped the towel. But I heard a faint crack. I was disappointed to see that my fumbling had broken the sand dollar into 3 parts. I wasn't willing to accept defeat, though, so I carefully glued all those parts back together until it was sort of back to normal. It was still visibly cracked, but it was whole once again. It was broken, but now repaired. So it is with covenant. Someday, maybe not long from now, someone here will speak out of anger and damage a relationship. Someone here will inadvertently exclude another from a group. Someone here will hurt someone they love. Why? Because we're human. We all make mistakes. But you know, when we make those mistakes and we crack our covenant, we can all work together to help glue those broken pieces back together.